हेलो बच्चों, कैसे हो? आपका स्वागत है त्रिपान स्टडी सेंटर में। आज जो हम करने जा रहे हैं काफ़ी महत्वपूर्ण चैप्टर है, इम्पैक्ट ऑफ ब्रिटिश रूल ऑन इंडियन इकोनॉमी, सोशल एंड कल्चर 1757 टू 1857। कहते हैं भारत में ब्रिटिश शासन का प्रभाव आर्थिक, सामाजिक, संस्कृति और ये समय काल जो है 1757 से लेकर 1857 यानी 100 साल के अंतराल में ये हमें टॉपिक आया है जो काफ़ी महत्वपूर्ण रहने वाला है। ये टॉपिक हर एक क्लास के बच्चों के लिए इंपॉर्टेंट रहेगा, चाहे वो सीबीएसई के में पढ़ते हों, चाहे यूपी बोर्ड के बच्चे हों, चाहे एनआईओएस के बच्चे हों, चाहे बिहार बोर्ड के बच्चे हों। सभी बच्चों के लिए ये टॉपिक काफ़ी महत्वपूर्ण रहेगा। अगर उनके सिलेबस में टॉपिक रहे तो उनके लिए बहुत ही महत्व रखेगा। इवन कि जो बच्चे कंपटीशन की तैयारी कर रहे हैं उनके लिए भी काफ़ी महत्वपूर्ण ये टॉपिक बनने वाला है। लेकिन आपको पता है, टॉपिक स्टार्ट करने से पहले एक बात जो मैं हमेशा कहता हूँ, जिसको आपको सोचना भी चाहिए, विचार भी करना चाहिए और इवन अमल भी करना चाहिए, वो ये है कि जब भी वीडियो देखिए पूरा देखिए, क्योंकि अधूरा जानकारी सदैव खतरनाक होता है। साथ में एक इंपॉर्टेंट बात ये भी रहता है, अगर आप पहली बार वीडियो देख रहे हो तो लाइक, शेयर, सब्सक्राइब करना मत भूलना। क्योंकि दोस्तों लाइक कीजिएगा तो बनाने वाले का मनोबल बढ़ता है, सब्सक्राइब कीजिएगा तो इससे ये होता है कि जब भी मैं कोई वीडियो डालूंगा उसका नोटिफिकेशन आपको समय रहते मिल जाएगा। और देखिए शेयर का मतलब ये होता है कि आपके थ्रू ना जाने किन बच्चों को हेल्प मिल जाए, ये आप भी नहीं जानोगे, इसलिए जो है आप शेयर जरूर करो, ठीक है। व्हाट्सएप स्टेटस पे भी लगाओ। दोस्तों एनएसएस सेंटर जो कई मानने में बहुत से बच्चों के लिए हेल्पफुल है, चाहे वो 8th क्लास हो, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th हो, चाहे वो एनआईओएस बोर्ड के बच्चे हों, ठीक है, चाहे बीए एमए के बच्चे हो, सभी क्लासों के लिए कुछ ना कुछ जो है त्रिपान सेंटर में उपलब्ध है। तो इसलिए आपके लिए ज़रूरी है कि आप सब्सक्राइब करके इसको चैनल को जो है सेव कर लो, नहीं तो बाद में अगर रिसर्च करोगे तो शायद आपको ये चैनल प्राप्त ना हो। तो इसलिए सोचना नहीं, विचार नहीं करना है, सब्सक्राइब करके जो है अपने पास सेव करना है। दोस्तों ये तो बात था आपके लिए, लेकिन आप देखते हैं हमारा आज टॉपिक क्या है। द नेक्स्ट टॉपिक इज इंपॉर्टेंट है, इकोनॉमिकल इम्पैक्ट। व्हाट इज हियर इकोनॉमिकल इम्पैक्ट? द इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन हैज हेल्प्ड टू द इंग्लैंड and merchant is accumulate a lot of capital from a country of Asia, Africa and America. There is an important here. Industrial revolution has helped to England. The merchant is accumulate a lot of capital from a countries of Asia, Africa and America. They now want to invest this wealth in a setting up industries and trade with India. The mass production of goods through their machines and that we witness today was a pioneers there through the Industrial Revolution, and which occurred first in England during the later 18th and earlier 19th century. There is an important period of time here. There is a current first England during to the later 18th and earlier 19th century, and this led to be a massive increasing in the output of finished product. The East India Company helped in the financing and expanding their industry base. During this time, there was a class of manufacturers in England who benefited more from manufacturing than to trading. They were interested in the having more raw materials from India as well as sending their finishing good back. Between 1793 and 1813, this is the British manufacturers launched a campaign against the company, and its trade is a monopoly and the prevalence it enjoyed. And ultimately they succeeded in the abolishing the East India Company as a monopoly of Indian trade. With this, Indian become an economical colony of industry of England. This is important. With this, India become an economical colony of industry of England. Let us learn more about the economical impact on a various Indian industry and trade. The first point here, textile industry and trade. Earlier, India is a handloom had a big market in Europe. Earlier, India as a handlooms had a big market in Europe. India textiles such as a cotton, satin, silk and woolens good already has a market in Asia and Africa. With the coming of industrialization in England, the textile industry there are made of important is a headway. There was now a reverse of the direction of textile trade between Britain and India. There was now as a reverse of the direction of the textile trade between Britain and India, and there was a massive import of machines and made clothes from England factory to England market. This import of large amount of product manufactured by the mechanical looms in England led to increase a threat for their handicraft industry as the British goods were sold at the much cheaper price. The British succeed in the selling their goods at a cheap price as a foreign goods and were given to the free entry in India without paying any duty. There is the most important name here. The British succeed in the selling their goods at a cheap price as a foreign goods were given free entry for India without paying any duty. There is free is very dangerous. On the other hand, India's handicraft were taxed heavily when they were sent out of country. And besides, under the pressure of the industrialist, British and government often impose a protective strip on Indian textile. There, within the few years, India from began an exporter of clothes, become an exporter of raw cotton and importer of British clothes. This service made a hug impact on the Indian handlooms and weaving industry, and leading to it is a virtual collapse in the area. It is also create unemployment for a large community of weavers, and many them migrated to the rulers area to work on their lands and agricultural labors. This is a turning point. There is a turn point, increasing of pressure on the rural economics and livelihood. And this process is an uneven competition faced by the Indian landloom industry. Was the latter is doubled by the Indian nationalist leader as a deindustrialization. The main aim of British was the transfer of India into the consumer of British good. There is a main aim for the Britisher. They are transfer for India into the consumer of British good. As a result, textile, metalwork and glass and paper industry were soon out of work. By 1813, the Indian is a handicraft lost both their domestic as well as a foreign market. India goods could not be complete with the British factory made a product where machines were used. This market were now captured and monopolized by the Britain by means of war and colonization, and from exporter India became a importer of these goods. They extract of money from the Indian rulers, merchants and jamidar and even to the common people. Added to this is a drains where to profit made through the trade and also there are salaries of the officially. It was evident that their economical policy were meant to be serve the interest of the East India Company and later the British Empire. The next year, land revenue policy and land settlement. Land revenue policy and land settlements. Since the same time, the main course of livelihood for the people were agriculture. Hence, land tax had formed a principal source of revenue from all their compeers all over the world. In the 18th century, the main occupation of the Indian people were the agriculture, and during the British rule, revenue from a land keep on increasing, and there are reasons for there were many. Earlier, the British had come to trade with India. Gradually, they wanted to conquer their vast territory of India for which they needed a lot of money. They also needed money for a trade project of the company as well as for the cost of running the administration. The British carry out a number of land revenue experiments which the caused the hardship of cultivator. The hardship cultivator, and they extract taxes from their farmer to the finance their policy and war effort. Direct and indirect. There is a direct and indirect mean where a carry out of wearing about this is a collection of revenue for the British. This affected the reliefs of the people who could not be meet their daily needs because they had to provide the land owner and the collector their share in the produce. The local administration failed to provide a relief and natural justice to the rural poor. The Lord is a Cornwallis introduced a permanent settlement in Bengal and Bihar in 1793. Lord Cornwallis is introduced the permanent settlement in Bengal and Bihar in 1793. It made the landlord or jamidar and deposit a fixed amount of money in the state treasury. In return, they were recognized as a hereditary owner of land, and this made the jamidar the owner of the land. The amount of revenue to be paid to the company was fixed for a period of time, and which made the British financially secure. Now there is advance as to be how much revenue was coming in from the state. The Jamidar also know how too much revenue was to be paid. So to be get a surplus revenue for himself, they asked the peasant to be increasing production. But if the Jamidar failed to pay the fixed revenue on the time, his land and was sold off the another Jamidar. The British stood a benefit from this settlement as a new class of Jamidar that emerged, become their political allies. They supporting the British in the time and need an act of the buffer between them and peasant. The class in fact supporting the British against the independent settlement. In 1822, the British introduced the Malawari settlement. Mahalawari settlement in the northern west province and Punjab and Ganga Valley and part of central India. Here the basis of assessment was the product of Mahal or state. Mahal or state, which may be a village or group of villages. Here all the proprietors of Mahal were jointed responsible for paying their sum of revenue assigned by the government. Unfortunately, there is about no benefit to be peasant as the British demand were very high. The Ratwari settlement was introduced in the beginning of the 19th century in many parts of Mumbai and Madras presidency. There were Tawari settlement in the 19th century and there are part of Mumbai and Madras presidency. Here the land revenue was imposed directly on the roots. The individual cultivator who actually worked on the land, there is a peasant was recognized as the owner of the land as long he was able to pay the revenue, but exploitations continue with the high revenue demands. The next topic is the most important here, commercialization of agriculture. There is a commercialization of agriculture here. Another major economical impact of the British policy in India was introduction of large number of commercial crops such as tea, coffee, indigo, opiums, cottons, jutes, sugarcane and oilseed. There is a most important impact of British policies in India are introduce a large number of commercial crops such as tea, coffee, indigo, opiums, cotton, jute, sugarcane and oilseed. Different kind of commercial crops were introduced with a different intention. India's opiums was used to the balance of trade of Chinese tea with a bitten in the letter of the favor. The market for opiums was strictly controlled by British trader, which did not leave a much scope for Indian producer to the reap profit. India has were to force to produce a indigo and sell its own condition as dedicated by the British. Indigo was sent to England and used as a nice agent for the cloth producing in a British town. Indigo was growing under a different system where all the farmer bears a complaints to be growth its own, the 12th or third part of their land. Unfortunately, cultivation of indigo left the land fertile of some years, and this made the farmers a recant of growth in it. In the tea plantation, our sheep, there is a ownership change to the land quite often. The worker on this plantation work under a lot of hardship. Commercialization of the agriculture further enhanced their speed of transfer of ownership of land and thereby increased the number of landless labor. It is also brought in a large number of merchant, trade and middlemen who further exploited the situation. The peasants now depend on them to sell their produce during the harvest time. Because the peasant now is shifting to a commercially crop, food grain and production went down. So less food stock are left to be found. It was therefore not to be surprising that a peasant is revolted. You will read about it as a details in the coming chapter. There was on the enormous drain of wealth from our country to be taken due to the various economic policies. Additional financial burden was placed on the India due to the expenditure on the salary, pension and training of military and civilian staff employed by the British rule India. If this wealth was invested in India, it could be have to help its economies improve to the economic in the country. Let us learn how to economical policy implemented by the British change the social, culture and Indian society. The next year, rise of new money lending class. The rise of new money lending class here, the time bound to be exclusive as a demand of revenue by the British government and force the peasant to be take a loan from to money lender. This money lender often exploited the peasant by the charging high interest rate. The farmer by charging high interest rate. They often used unfair mean like a false counting forwarded to the signature and thumb impression. There is a fraud. The new legal system and the policy introduced by the British only helped the money lender who were either local merchant and landlord. In most cases, a farmer failed to pay or back the loan with a fully interest. And this their land is gradually passed into the land of money lending class. The next year, rise of new middle class. A major impact of British rule in India was the beginning of new middle class. There is a rising of new middle class on impact of British ruler. With the rise of British commercial interest, new opportunity opened to a small section of the Indian people. They often act as the agent and intermediaries of the British traders and thus made a hug fortune. The new landed aristocracy, which is a coming to begin after the introduction of permanent settlement, also form a part of this new class. A major section of all landownings aristocracy lost ownership of their land and in many cases were replaced by a new class of land owners. These people got a common English education and become the new elite. With the spirit of their British power, the new job opportunities were also created. Indian society witnessed their introduce of new law codes and government officially and commercially agency. The English education people naturally got to the necessary patagons from there is a colonial ruler. Thus, a new profession and service holding a middle class was also created by the British apart from those with the landed interested. The next year, transport and communication. The mean of transport in India at that time were a bulk cart, camel, and bag as a packed animals. England, on the other hand, needed a railway that connected the raw materials and producing area with exporting ports and the facilitated their movement of British goods to different part of country, as well as very raw material to be ports. The vast network of railways that you witness today was pioneers and during the latter half of the 19th century. This opened avenue of the British banker and investor to invest surplus wealth and materials in the contraction of railways. Railways benefited there is a British capitalist in a two important way. First, it is made a trading of commodity much easier to the profitable by connected the internal market in the ports. And secondly, the railway engine, a coach, and the capital input for the buildings of rail line come for the Britain. The British capitalists who is invest in the railway were also granted a minimum profit of 5% by government. That is important. The British capitalists who is invested in a railways were also granted a minimum profit of 5% by the government. And these companies were also given a free land with the less of 99 years. Third, the railways were set up for the advantage of British trade, and they also play an important role in the national awakening of country. Third, the British had never anticipated the extensive transport network and improved the education toward their people and India closer. During the British rule, India took an idea of liberty, equality, human rights, and science and technology from the West. And this accelerated the process of modernizations. And now we will read about the impact of modern idea on Indian society.